Hi, I'm Sandeep, and you're watching the Indian Weekender. Today is October 20th, 2021, and Auckland is still in level 3 lockdown, probably around in ninth week. And this morning, earlier today, leader of opposition and National Party leader Judith Collins announced National's back in business plan, primarily a financial plan, where it is proposing to end Auckland's lockdown and open up New Zealand's border for the rest of the world once we reach 85 to 90% of vaccination rates or on 1st of December, whichever happens before, earlier. And following this decision, already some of the experts they have criticized the deadline of 1st of December for opening up and ending of lockdowns. And government is still defending its decision to keep Auckland in lockdown. So, to discuss on this and continue the debate and continue the contestation of ideas that New Zealanders are facing today to manage COVID and reopen to the rest of the world, we have got Leader of Opposition, Honorable Judith Collins, joining us today from Wellington to our virtual studio. Welcome to our studio, Judith. How are you today?
Oh, I'm good. Thank you, Sandy. Thank you for having me. I'm very grateful for the opportunity to talk with your viewers and yourself.
Surely. So let's start straight away. Like you have come up with this major policy announcement, I would say, a bit of fixed deadline. And already we are beginning to see some kind of criticism from experts. They say probably it's not a good idea to put a deadline of 1st of December. So what do you have to say about that?
It's not a good idea not to have a deadline. It's like it's not a good idea not to have targets. So we've said if we get to 85%, we'd prefer 90, but let's just get to 85% of people double vaccinated in New Zealand. And if every district health board area has at least 80%, so that deals with any of the little bit behind, then we should be safe to open for business and to end these lockdowns. I'd also say too, Sandy, and I was really shocked to find out, and I'm sure everyone will be, that in just the first 6 weeks of the lockdown, which is now in its 10th week, that 85,000 procedures or appointments, first specialist assessments, endoscopies, scans in the public health system were cancelled. So that's 85,000 people or procedures cancelled in just 6 weeks. And you imagine what that looks like for a whole year. It is an enormous cost to people. And that's when people don't get their cancer treatment or early enough. So we are losing people now, we know, because they're not getting their assessments early enough nor starting their treatment. So we have to be able to open at some stage. We cannot spend the next 1, 2, 3 years in and out of lockdown and not only losing business, but actually losing lives, whether it's to cancer, whether it's to heart disease, whether it's actually to suicide. As we know, mental health toll is huge.
Yeah, so do you think that Kiwis in general, they are getting National's message across, like they are understanding what you're trying to say? Or do you say that when government says that National is changing its position and being inconsistent, that is valid?
No, they're entirely wrong. I had pulled the Prime Minister up about it today in Parliament, where she had been quoting figures and trying to make out they've changed them. We haven't changed our figures. We've said very clearly that if we got to a 70-75% double vaccination rate, we shouldn't have to have entirely nationwide lockdowns, just have regional ones. We're already in that. So, I don't know what she's talking about. We've also said if we get to 85 to 90, let's just make it 85% double vaccinated, then we can stop doing lockdowns altogether. But we also need to have the rapid antigen testing. We've also got to have saliva testing. None of these things are properly available yet in the community. We should be able to go down to the pharmacist, Sandeep, and go and buy our own rapid antigen tests. We should have rapid antigen tests when people are going on planes to the South Island from the North Island. The South Island is in level 2 lockdown. They have not had any COVID for a year. So what is the sense of it? And the answer is the government doesn't want to use new technology. Actually, not even that new now, technology that other countries are using.
Fair enough. Now I completely understand that. And probably we can expect something coming out this Friday when a government comes with their COVID-19 plan. But yes, but again, coming back to Auckland, let's talk about Auckland first. Like Auckland has been in such a long lockdown, probably a lot of Aucklanders might not even know how the life is in the rest of New Zealand at level 2. So let's go back into national plan and try to understand that how life would be for Aucklanders for the remaining 6 weeks till the 1st December deadline. So
Well,
would you allow Auckland to come out of lockdown?
well, not right now, not while we don't have the vaccination numbers up, but by the 1st of December, absolutely. And if the vaccination rates come up and we get double vaccinated of 85%, yes, Auckland would come out earlier than the 1st of December. So we're saying no matter what, 1st of December. Now, that means that we already know that there's about 85% of people have had their first vaccination. So we know there's no reason at all why we won't get 85% by the end in 6 weeks' time.
That is one thing, actually. A lot of people, they just want to apply common sense and say that if 85% they are already first vaccinated, then probably they might come back and get them again vaccinated. And that would probably reach the deadline that you are saying, 85 to 90%. But government is still being hesitant and reluctant to take that target as a natural one. So why do you think, while government is being hesitant in accepting 85 to 90% target?
I think the government has no experience of business. And I say that it's not a judgment, it's just basically that's the fact. I can't think of any, maybe Damien O'Connor, I think he might have once run a business for about a year. Many of us have been in business for a long time before we went into politics, and some still have business interests. It's really important that we understand how hard it is, particularly for small businesses, which is why there's a big chunk of our policy today is about small businesses, because we know that they're hurting. I was in Auckland just over a week ago. I've been obviously coming back to Wellington. I was tested negative for COVID before coming back. I self-isolated for 5 days here for another test. But I've been in Auckland for a week before that, and what I saw was businesses trying their very best, people looking to lose their livelihoods and in some cases their homes. And I saw that it is very clear is that more and more people are just saying that they're not going to keep complying.
Sure, definitely. I will come back and speak to you a lot about small businesses. As you said, that's a major chunk of your policy announcement today. But coming back to vaccination and getting Aucklanders up to the speed where we want Aucklanders to come out of this lockdown. So what under national plan, what would national do differently to encourage people to come to vaccination?
Well, no, it's a very good question. So number one, we wouldn't be in this situation because we would have got the vaccine earlier. We only had 20% of the population double vaccinated 10 weeks ago when this lockdown first started. But let's put that aside and just say, what would we be doing? Well, they should have been getting around to particularly the Māori health providers, because actually the vaccination rates are worst amongst Māori, and that is the problem. So if you look at the vaccination rates amongst Asian New Zealanders, European New Zealanders, you'll find the rates are pretty high. Pacifica New Zealanders pretty high in the 70s, but it's in Māoridom that the issue is. Now, how can we deal with that? Well, first off, get the Waipirera Trust out, which provides a whānau ora service. They want to be able to access Māori patients' records so that they can see whether or not they're vaccinated. The Ministry of Health won't let them. We've got people who, we understand that's not a normal thing to do, but these are not normal times and we need to take action. So do I think that they should be helped? Yes, I do. Why? Because they're the people most likely to be able to get needles and arms. We've got Dr. Shane Reti, our own deputy leader here, and also our health spokesman. He has been up in Northland for days. He's going back tomorrow to go and keep doing vaccinations for people. These are the sorts of things to do. And as he said to me today, he's been out in very rural, remote Northland, often meeting Māori communities and just families and just saying, this is what we're going to do. We're going to get you vaccinated. And people saying, oh, okay, so, basically we trust you. Now that's what we need. We need people who can be trusted and who people know and who they'll take the advice on, and we need to take it to the people. The government should be going door to door at the moment. They should get those Māori health providers out door to door in places like Clendon and places like in parts of West.
So what do you think? What exactly government is doing right now? Like, are they not going door to door?
No, they're not. No, they're not. And in fact, what I'm hearing, because of course I'm now in Wellington, but from my friends in South Auckland, particularly in Papakura, my electorate, they're telling me, those in politics there, is that local government and others who are able to be there, that they are getting out involved in campaigns to get funding to help encourage people to get vaccinated. So they're doing things like putting together care packages or food packages, whatever it is, to give to people if they get vaccinated. Now, it shouldn't be necessary, and we all know that, Sandy. It shouldn't be necessary, but in some cases it is, and we just got to get it done.
Right. Okay. Now, coming back to the vaccination, right? Coming back to opening up to the rest of the border, because that's also an important component of your today's policy. So you're proposing that under a nationals plan, probably we will be ready to open our border on 1st of December. So would MIQ be abolished under a national plan?
Well, we should be able to essentially put MIQ down to a very small organisation. So right at the moment, it is this massive blockage for Kiwis to come home for Christmas. And this is part of our lifestyle, being able to come home for Christmas and to spend summer with your family. Now, when we look at what's happening with this, so we would say New Zealand citizens and permanent residents who are double vaccinated with one of the vaccines that we recognise, such as Pfizer, if they test negative before they come in on a plane and test negative when they come off with the rapid antigen testing, then if they're coming from what we would call a green light area country, one that doesn't have much COVID around, very similar to our own, then they would be able to go straight home. And we would obviously, they have to do contact trace and all those sorts of things. And for people coming from what we'd call orange light countries where there's a bit more COVID, such as the United Kingdom, then they would be able to self-isolate at home for a week before they could get out and about in New Zealand. But of course, negative tests before they're on a plane, when they're off the plane. And for those coming from red light countries, that they would need to go through, still have negative tests before and after, but they would also have to go through an MIQ for the full time. Now, so MIQ could be actually reduced down to people coming from countries where COVID is rampant. And for anyone who is not double vaccinated and not New Zealand citizens or people residents.
Well, that's quite comprehensive. Now, coming to this, particularly the red light zone areas, actually, as we note that New Zealand has still put India in a red light zone, which is a little bit astonishing, given that India has quite well managed its COVID rates in recent time. The capital city, Delhi, which has got population more than of Australia, probably they haven't resorted any single case of COVID in the last couple of days. So would a national government revisit that plan and consider taking India out of that red zone?
Well, before deciding which countries were in which zone, we'd have to take the public health advice on that. And I think that would change depending on what is happening in those countries. So I wouldn't want to rule it out, but I also wouldn't want to say yes to it, because it would depend very much what the public health advice was, because I'm not an expert on the public health of India or COVID in India or any other country, but it is very important that we understand and we recognise that the situation in each country tends to change in a pretty short period of time.
All right. Okay. Now, coming back to the business support plan that you have talked, which was a major chunk of today's policy announcement today. So you are proposing a major boost and help to the businesses. So the first thing is that you're talking about support to businesses all over New Zealand. Have you not considered thinking in particular about businesses who are struggling in Auckland?
Well, I think at the moment there's a lot of businesses struggling all over the country, and if particularly in Auckland, though, and that's where the level system is helpful when it comes to getting the wage subsidy. And so we would increase that up to $800 a week per full-time equivalent, because we know too is that any resilience in a lot of businesses has already gone because of the constant nature of the lockdown. So it is really important that we understand too, say in the tourism sector, say in places like Queenstown, the South Island, is that they lost all their Australian tourists, they lost all their international tourists, And then they relied on the Auckland tourists, which are normally equivalent to about 40% of their business. And that's all gone. So for them, they're not in Auckland, but they're deeply affected by Auckland. So it all depends on, have businesses had this massive loss? If businesses had the loss and they qualify, yes, we would help them out. If they haven't had a loss, good for them. They don't need help.
Right. Okay. Now, you certainly, upping the wage subsidy up to $800 would be a big relief for the workers. So what would you offer to the businesses? What this policy is offering for businesses under the
there's a lot around businesses, particularly the small businesses, and really those who employ 19 or fewer full-time equivalents, because they're the businesses, the struggling, those often the hairdressers, the physiotherapists, all these sorts of people. They've lost a lot of business, and in many cases haven't been able to operate at all. Now, for them, and for any small business like that, that doesn't earn over a set amount a year, that we would say to them, and they've lost money, would say, well, you're going to have basically 17.5% tax rate, down from the current 28. We would be able to bring you down to a rate where you actually can get to keep some money. Now, that is really important for them. And I know that it means that there's a cut in the tax take, but a cut in the tax rate take for the government is significantly better than no tax from business that's folded up and died and closed. So it's really important that we do that. We think a lower tax rate is important. We're also saying that for everybody, including the workers, even those on minimum wages, they will all get something from the tax cut as well, because we'd be raising the threshold from when they move up on the progressive tax scale, 14 to 17. So that 1,000 a year is 14 to 17, and that would actually, percentage rates, that would actually mean that they would be significantly better off. But they'll get a few $100s a year, but actually it will help people for whom a few $100s a year is not something to be sneezed at. It's the difference between paying the bills and not paying the bills.
Sure. So is it fair to say that Nationals tax cut are back in a new avatar now in the COVID times?
Yeah, we need to have it. We've said for the next 2 years, and we think too there's a lot of things that we're doing for even bigger businesses too. Any business where it comes to being able to write off assets that you buy, capital items, a much more generous capital write-off ability. And that's up to 150,000. So that is enormously better than what the government's got at the moment, which is about $1,000. So really gives people an incentive to take what money they have and to purchase plant and equipment.
Right. Okay. Now, I think, Judith, we have got one of our audiences sending a question, and I think question is inspired more by National's willingness, or rather say government's, Labour's willingness to work with National in the earlier policy announcement earlier this week on the housing sector, where Labour is willing to come with Nationals. So one of our readers, Gaurav Gupta, he has asked that can National work with Labour, or maybe other way around, and get a confirmation on opening of the border soon?
Well, look, we've offered. So we offered to work with Labor earlier this year. I wrote to the Prime Minister in January and said, look, I think we should work together on housing. These are our plans. This is what we do. I put a private members bill in. It took us some months, but eventually we've got a result whereby we've been working together. Well, that's great. So we put out a plan on how to open the borders, how to deal with COVID, which therapeutic drugs we should have in, all these things. We put it out 3 weeks ago. The government has slowly been adopting parts of it, but they would do much better if they just listened to us, because we have, we don't know everything, but we've been in business, we've been in government before, we understand how things work. We've got people like Dr. Shane Retty, we've got people like Andrew Bailey, very experienced people in communities and in their own finance and in medicine. We understand what needs to happen. We put the plans out. We just say to them, we're very happy to help. But, even the Vaccinathon that was last Saturday, it was a great event. People, 130,000 people vaccinated. Isn't that great? It was supposed to be apolitical, and yet only government members of parliament were invited. I thought that was a shame. They lost an opportunity. And actually, we just, those of us who could, I wasn't. I was in my own isolation because I'd come from Auckland. But some of our people were out there doing what they could. But you need a big heart when you're trying to go across government and across Parliament, and I suggest that they do that.
Surely, I think, you have answered the question. Probably we'll go back and ask government next time when we get a chance on this important issue. Now, coming to another important thing that you have been talking about in this policy announcement is that you, under a national proposed plan, the fully vaccinated businesses would be allowed to open. So I think that is in all alert levels or just in alert level 2 and above?
We'd have to get rid of alert levels once you get to 85%. Fully vaccinated in the country. Obviously, you shouldn't have to have them. It's really important that we say, let's just get that vaccination rate up. Let's get the drugs in place, the therapeutic drugs, because one of the things that's happened with COVID is because the whole world has been affected by it, there's been an enormous amount of money put into developing better antiviral therapeutic drugs. And those are now coming on stream. So get those in place. Get the rapid antigen testing. Get all those things in place. But you shouldn't have to have all these levels and restrictions. We should be able to get on and have our lives. And particularly we've always said
that's
too.
One point. Sorry to interrupt you there, but that's one point that probably the government and Labour has been time and again coming and criticizing National, that probably National is in a little bit haste and changing positions. Do you think National, under your leadership, has learned something from the last lockdown, the post-last lockdown, where probably National was perceived as changing its position too many times?
Well, we haven't changed position. I think the Prime Minister's going back a couple of leaders of National. I certainly haven't changed position. What has been very clear is that we had no vaccine last year. Vaccine was clearly being developed. The government could have ordered the vaccine earlier. We didn't get it until late. We were one of the last countries in the OECD to start vaccinating. It is pretty clear is that it's been the rollout has been until recently a total failure. But luckily, we've got some people getting vaccinated now, but at an enormous cost to the economy in terms of businesses and lockdown. So we need to get that vaccination rate up. But what we also know is we didn't have any of these therapeutic drugs last year. We now have them available coming on stream overseas, and the government needs to make sure that they order the drugs. And by the way, they still need to order the booster for the Pfizer vaccine for next year, which they still haven't done.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, you're quite right over there. Again, we will have to go back and see what's government stand on that. Probably, they are still not very clear if they want to get those rapid antigen testing, unless they come out and announce this Friday. We still need to see that. Now, coming under the requiring the vaccination certificates that you're allowing businesses to basically use vaccination certificates and require their staff or their guests to be vaccinated. So is this something that you have been hearing from businesses, hospitality industry in particular?
Yes. So let's just get the law really straight. So under the health and safety legislation, business owners or those PCBUs, they're called the people in charge of business or undertakings, they have to make safety assessments on what's appropriate for them. And it is very important that they make those safety assessments. It's a typical health and safety legal situation. In addition to that, we've had some business organisations come out and say they just want the government to say that everybody in every business needs to be vaccinated. I think that is possibly a bit too far, but the government so far hasn't done that anyway. I think it is also very clear, what is very clear, is that if there's any doubt about the legal situation, that the government should use its Crown lawyers to provide the legal advice and to make that available to the public so that the public has a one-stop shop in terms of giving the advice. If the government needs to change the law, they should change the law. But they first off need to share that advice, get the advice, share the advice so that we all know what the advice is. Otherwise, people are just sort of making it up as they go along. Now, I'm not only a lawyer, but I'm also someone who is qualified in health and safety. And I'm very aware that the health and safety legislation would makes a requirement really for every workplace to make assumptions and to make assessments on health and safety.
Right. Okay. So I think, yeah, we have already discussed quite comprehensively what National's proposed plan will look like. And but before I let you go, a couple of more questions actually. One is related to this recently announced one-off resident visa by the government, which
Yes.
probably is again, government is following what National would have said, allowing
We've
people
been
who
saying
are
for a long time. Yep.
Yes, but coming back to on that, like after the government's announcement, there has been a lot of hue and cry for people who have been left out of that one-off resident visa category. So, under a national government, would you consider bringing them in that fold as well and giving the right to live here permanently?
Well, I think that that will depend on what they're adding. So, are they adding as essential services? Are they going to be adding to the economy? Are they working? Are they able to contribute to New Zealand? So, I think you need to go back to first principles is what our immigration policy is about. And what it is about is making the best outcomes for New Zealand. So, when I look at the 165,000 people who became possibly eligible for the one-off situation of permanent residency and a pathway through to citizenship, that's 165,000 is the same size as the city of Hamilton, which just shows you how large that is. Those are all people who should have been being processed over the last 18 months. So we've said, and our immigration spokesperson has been working very hard on this. Okay, yeah, we support the 165,000. Why? They're already here. They're already working. They're already able to contribute, and we need them. So at the same time, any new ones, we need to make sure that we look at what we can cope with, because right at the moment, we're not quite sure what we're going to cope with when it comes to COVID. But if they're health professionals and they're urgently needed, let's get them in.
Right. Okay. Well, yeah, I think most of the people who are making that noise are the people who have been in New Zealand for many years. And they have been working and contributing to New Zealand economy, New Zealand society. The only thing is probably they might have changed the visas because of New Zealand's current immigration situation where there has been long, prolonged delays in immigration. And that is why probably they are caught on either on a wrong visa or they have been locked out of New Zealand borders. But they do have strong connections with the New Zealand, which is clearly demonstrable. So,
well,
under a national government, would you consider
I think on Sandeep, because I wasn't thinking of talking immigration today, you might be best to get our spokesperson Erica Stanford to zoom in with you.
No, surely, I will come in. Surely, I will again. We will definitely have a chat. But another thing,
talks immigration all day long.
Yeah, fair enough. No, I do understand that. Now, coming back to another thing about the businesses support, one more thing that probably businesses they are suffering right now, which is again a fallout of this sudden announcement of one-off residence announcement. What has happened is that a lot of workers who have been working for businesses, particularly in the hospitality industry, suddenly they have decided not to continue their work, or they might decide because they have got a permanent pathway sitting in front of them for residency. So that's a challenge that probably hospitality industry is starting to face. Have you heard anything from them in this regard yet?
No, we haven't yet. We've heard from the hospitality sector that if they are open, they find difficulty getting staff. And as we know, a lot of the people in the hospitality sector, the staff, often are not born in New Zealand. They come in from overseas. They come in as students. They get jobs. They get roots set down, they meet partners, they get married, they become Kiwis. We're all either the children or grandchildren, descendants of immigrants if we're not already immigrants ourselves. Even Māori came here as immigrants. Everybody's immigrant. So we, or the descendants of them. So what we're hearing, though, is that they're having difficulty getting staff. And a lot of that is around the fact that it's almost impossible to get into New Zealand at the moment, unless you seem to be a comedian or some other entertainer from Australia who the Prime Minister's heard of.
Right, okay.
Bad decisions going on there.
Well, I think, and under this National's proposed plan that is announced today back in business, probably if New Zealand is ready to open up the borders on 1st of December, then probably most of those problems will be automatically sorted.
I think so. I think so. It'd be a lot easier. And I just think that New Zealand, we need to get ourselves out of this hermit kingdom mentality We can't be locked off from the rest of the world. When we look overseas and we see what's happening on our television screens or our friends or videos and social media, we can see that Europe is pretty much opened up. People are going to the beach for holidays. People are going skiing for holidays. They're going visiting other countries. They're making sure they're vaccinated. They're making sure they're taking precautions and wearing masks and things, and they're getting themselves tested. And they're learning to live in a world where COVID is going to be around for quite some time and that it mutates. So we just need to be we cannot continue to borrow money like we are at the moment, as a government is doing, to basically pay for the grocery bills. It's like going to the supermarket and putting all your groceries on a Visa with no money in the bank to pay for the Visa. That's what's happening.
Well, yeah, it all looks very good, Judith, I would say. And but as per the last survey that was done, probably the beginning of this recent lockdown, that was probably in late August, what we figured out was that the Kiwi population, they were still okay with the lockdowns. But yeah, that was probably 8 weeks before. It would be interesting to see how in the last 9 weeks their support for the lockdowns has gone, and how they are basically taking national's new policy, understanding that probably that's the way to go forward. So it would be interesting to watch that space.
Well,
but anyways, yeah, thanks for your time.
We do the right thing as we see it anyway.
Sure. Now, on that note, thank you very much, Judith. I do understand. Thanks for giving your time today on a busy day. We really appreciate it. We will come back and speak to you again in the near future. Thank you.
Thank you, Sandeep. And might I suggest Erica Stanford for Immigration? I'm sure she'd love to be on your show.
Sure, definitely. Thank you.